Good morning, traders. In this video, we will learn from scratch how to configure and use the account replicator for NinjaTrader 8, software designed to replicate trades made from a main account to multiple secondary accounts, with no limitation on the number of accounts, connections, or prop firms that we can use. The replicator was originally created for people who trade directly from NinjaTrader 8. But it can also be used if you prefer to execute your trades from TradingView or Tradovate. In these last two cases, you must keep something important in mind. The replicator continues running inside NinjaTrader 8, so you will need to install NinjaTrader on your computer and keep it open while you use the replicator, even if you trade the main account from TradingView or Tradovate. With that said, let's begin. Before getting into the installation, I want to briefly explain what makes this replicator different. At first glance, any replicator seems to do something very simple. We place a trade in one account, and it is copied to the others. However, when we trade multiple accounts in the real market, much more complex situations can occur. One account may execute all the contracts, while another executes only part of them. A modification may be accepted in the parent account and rejected in a slave account, or pending orders may remain due to execution or communication problems. That is why, in addition to copying trades, our replicator incorporates different monitoring, protection, and control algorithms. You do not need to know technically how they work, but it is important to understand what problems they are intended to solve. One of them is the queued targets and stops system. Let us imagine that the parent account enters with 5 contracts, but a slave account only manages to execute 2. Instead of blindly placing take profits and stop losses for the original 5 contracts, the replicator protects only the contracts that were actually executed. If more contracts are executed later, it will also place the corresponding protection according to the ATM of the parent account. In this way, an exit order for an amount greater than the actual position is prevented from potentially generating an opposite position. We also have the protective guardian robot. When moving a stop loss, it may happen that the change is accepted in the parent account but rejected in one of the slave accounts. If the parent account later closes, that slave account could remain open. The guardian robot monitors these types of situations, and if it detects that the parent account has already closed while a slave remained open due to a rejection, it attempts to close that position safely. Another important mechanism is the cleanup of residual orders. When a limit entry is not fully executed in a slave account, the remaining portion could remain pending even after the trade has ended. If it remained there, it could execute later and open a position that we no longer want. The replicator incorporates logic designed to detect and remove these types of orders, corresponding to trades that have already ended. It also has mechanisms for working with so-called false rhythmic positions. In certain situations, NinjaTrader may display a position that actually no longer exists at the broker. Attempting to manually close a false position could cause an opposite trade. For this reason, the replicator can detect these situations and attempt to correct them. Finally, we have different safe closing algorithms. When the replicator needs to close a position, it does not simply send a market order without considering what is happening around it. It attempts to avoid race conditions, for example, where a closing order and a stop loss execute practically at the same time and end up generating an opposite position. These are only a few examples. There are other internal mechanisms designed to monitor replication and reduce the number of situations in which the user would have to react manually. In addition, the replicator allows you to work with multiple Tradovate, Rhythmic, and other provider connections, organize accounts into independent groups, use general or instrument-specific contract multipliers, convert between compatible contract sizes, exclude instruments, turn off accounts individually, establish daily limits, monitor P&L, and act on one account, one group, or all accounts through different closing controls. It also includes an operational view designed to monitor many accounts simultaneously. Integration with Telegram to receive certain alerts and execute some actions remotely. And the ability to work from NinjaTrader, TradingView, or Tradovate. Later, we will see all these functions in context. The product also includes updates, personalized support, and additional tools included with our products, such as the Trading Journal and the Personal Finance Manager. The idea, therefore, is not simply to copy an order from one account to another, but to provide a replication and monitoring system prepared for many of the situations that can arise when we work with multiple accounts in a real market. Now, let's move on to the tutorial. We will start from the very basics, because this video is also intended for people who have never used NinjaTrader, or who previously have only traded from TradingView or Tradovate. If you already have experience with NinjaTrader, you will probably have already completed some steps and can simply continue with the following ones. The first thing we need is to install NinjaTrader 8 and have credentials to log into the platform. If you already have NinjaTrader installed and a NinjaTrader user account, you can skip this part. To perform the installation, go to brunameza.com and click the Download NinjaTrader 8 button. Since NinjaTrader's website and registration process may change over time, we keep the exact and updated instructions directly on our website. This way we can modify them when necessary without having to record this tutorial again. Follow the indicated steps there, and once you have NinjaTrader installed, return to this point in the video. Then open NinjaTrader and enter your username and password. These will be the credentials you will normally use to log into the platform. Some companies may provide credentials that also allow you to log directly into NinjaTrader. If you already know the platform well, you can use them, but for someone who is just starting, we recommend using a general NinjaTrader user account, and then adding the different prop firms or brokers from within the platform. Now we need to allow NinjaTrader to work with multiple connections. To do this, we go into Tools, then Options, and activate the Multi-Provider function. This will allow us to configure and simultaneously use different connections within NinjaTrader. If you use an older version in which this option does not appear, you can skip this step. Once this is done, we can configure our prop firms and brokers. In futures, there are different connection providers, such as Tradovate, Rithmic, CQG, and others. Normally, when you purchase an account, the company provides you with credentials corresponding to one of these providers. In this tutorial, we will focus mainly on Tradovate and Rithmic. If you use a different one, you will need to consult your company's instructions for connecting it to NinjaTrader, although the general procedure is usually similar. Let's begin with companies that use Tradovate and with live accounts opened with NinjaTrader. We go into Connections and click Configure. Within the available connections, we look for the connection called simply NinjaTrader, without any additional word, and double-click it to add it to our configured connections. Then we select it in the lower area. We can begin by changing its name, something recommended when we use several companies because it allows us to easily identify which one each connection belongs to. Next, we enter the username and password provided by our company or broker and save the configuration. If we have another company that uses Tradovate or another live NinjaTrader account, we simply repeat the procedure using their respective credentials. We can do this with all the connections we need. Once configured, we return to Connections and click on each one to connect them. In this way, we will be able to view within NinjaTrader the accounts corresponding to our different companies. If a connection does not work, first verify the username, password, and instructions provided by the company. Authentication or connection problems with the provider do not depend on the replicator. In addition, if you use a prop firm with Tradovate, make sure you have previously logged into Tradovate and accepted the corresponding terms and conditions. Now, let's move on to Rithmic. There is an important consideration here. NinjaTrader only allows one Rithmic type connection to remain active at a time within the same instance of the platform. This means that you can have one company with Rithmic connected together with all your Tradovate connections and your live NinjaTrader accounts. The problem only appears if you want to simultaneously use two or more different companies that use Rithmic. In that case, we need to open additional instances of NinjaTrader. The replicator is designed to work between these different instances. For example, we could have in our first instance one company with Rithmic together with all the Tradovate companies. If we have a second company with Rithmic, we will use a second NinjaTrader instance for it. If we had a third one, we would use a third instance, and so on. Since this situation only affects those who use more than one company with Rithmic, we are not going to extend this video by explaining the entire procedure. We have prepared a specific tutorial for configuring the additional instances, and you will find its link in the video description or on the page from which you are viewing this content. If you only have one Rithmic connection, you do not need to do any of this. To configure that first connection, we once again go into Connections, click Configure, and look for Rithmic for NinjaTrader brokerage. We add it, we can change its name to identify the company, and we enter the provided username and password. We will also have to select the corresponding server. This information depends on the company, so you must use exactly the server indicated by it. We save the configuration and then go to Connections to connect it. As with Tradovate, if you have problems, you must verify your credentials, the server, and the instructions provided by your company. Also make sure you have previously logged into Rithmic and accepted its terms and conditions. With our accounts now available within NinjaTrader, we can begin using the replicator. The window is designed to open automatically when we start NinjaTrader 8. If you close it or need to open it again, go to Herramientas or Tools if you use NinjaTrader in English, and select Bruno Meza, Replicator for NinjaTrader 8. Our recommendation is to keep this window open while you trade. You can place it wherever you prefer, or minimize it when you don't need it. But remember that it is not used only to configure the accounts. It also functions as a monitoring tool and contains controls that may be important during trading. Now we are going to create our first configuration. The first thing is to select the parent account. This will be the account that we will trade manually and whose trades we want to replicate. We look for the corresponding account and check Parent. Then we select as slave all the accounts to which we want to replicate. From that moment on, we will have one parent account and one or more slave accounts. Trades made in the parent account will be replicated to the slave accounts in that group, according to the configuration we establish. Each slave also has an on and off switch. If we want a specific account to temporarily not participate in new trades, we simply set it to off. When we want to use it again, we turn it back on. This is different from removing it from the group. To permanently stop using an account as a slave within that configuration, we simply uncheck its slave checkbox. We can also remove the parent account using the corresponding button next to parent, and then select a different one. If we want to remove both the parent account and all the slave accounts from the group and start from scratch, we can use Clear settings. This clears the selection of the current group without needing to delete it. If before using live or funded accounts you want to practice, NinjaTrader allows you to create additional simulation accounts. From the Control Center, you can right-click on SIM 101 and use the option to add a new simulated account. After creating it, disconnect and reconnect so that NinjaTrader properly enables the new accounts. This is a good way to become familiar with the replicator before using it with real capital. When we select an account as a slave, different options will appear. One of the main ones is the X parameter, which represents its general contract multiplier. By default, it is configured at 1. This means that the slave account will use the same number of contracts as the parent account. The rule is simple. The number of contracts in the parent account is multiplied by the value of the X. If we have a multiplier of 2, an entry of 1 contract in the parent account will become 2 contracts in that slave account, and an entry of 3 will become 6. If we configure 3, the amount is tripled, and so on. In addition to the general multiplier, we can establish specific multipliers for certain instruments by clicking the gear located next to the multiplier. The general multiplier works as the default value. For example, if it is configured at 1, all instruments will use 1, except those to which we have assigned a specific value. If we add the S&P 500 with a multiplier of 2, the S&P will use 2, while the other instruments will continue using the global multiplier. Therefore, when there is a specific configuration for an instrument, it takes priority over the general configuration. Each slave account also has the Configure button. From there, we can modify different parameters that affect only that account within that group. One of these functions is the daily limits. We can establish a maximum daily loss and a maximum daily profit for a slave account. When the account reaches the configured limit, the replicator will close its open positions and turn off its replication to prevent it from continuing to receive new trades. These limits are designed as a management tool, not as a lock that is impossible to modify. The user can later change the configuration and re-enable the account. If what you need is a system specifically designed to prevent you from modifying your rules once certain limits have been reached, and to apply much broader restrictions to your trading, you can use our Emotional Manager for NinjaTrader 8, which is created specifically for that purpose. Another available function is conversion between mini and micro contracts. This option is used when we want a slave account to trade a different version of the instrument used in the parent account. If we activate the mini to micro option, then when the parent account enters a mini contract, the slave account will enter the micro contract. On the other hand, if we activate the micro to mini option, when the parent account enters the micro contract, the slave account will enter the mini contract. In the version shown in this tutorial, conversions between mini and micro are available. Since the replicator is constantly updated, it is possible that when you are watching this video, conversions to nano contracts may also exist. You can check the currently available functions in the updated product description. We also have preventive alerts. If the replicator detects that an account apparently did not correctly open or close a trade, it may display a warning. These alerts do not necessarily mean that there is a confirmed problem. Under certain circumstances, they may appear preventively, and it may later be confirmed that everything was correct. Their purpose is to draw our attention so that we can quickly review the account. You can disable them if you wish, but we recommend keeping them enabled, especially when you manage many accounts at the same time. Within the configuration, you will also find mechanisms related to false positions and other protection algorithms, including the protective guardian robot that we explained at the beginning of the video. You do not need to understand how they work internally. Our general recommendation is to keep enabled the mechanisms that come enabled by default. The replicator also has a different operating mode called Market Edition. This mode modifies the way replication is executed and is not recommended for most users. If you are a beginner, we recommend simply keeping normal mode, which is the mode used and recommended for approximately 95% of traders. If you are an advanced user and want to learn about Market Edition, you can consult the explanation included within the program itself and decide whether its characteristics are suitable for your trading. Within Market Edition, you will also find the contrary option. This function allows a specific slave account to trade in the opposite direction from the parent account. If the parent account buys, that slave account sells, and if the parent account sells, the slave account buys. Contrary only works within Market Edition. If you decide to use it, make sure you previously understand how that mode works, because you will be modifying both the execution system and the direction of the trade. So far, we have created a configuration made up of one parent account and several slave accounts. We call this a replication group. However, we can create multiple independent groups. We can have, for example, a first parent account with 5 slave accounts and a second completely different parent account with another 3. When we trade the first parent account, its group will operate, and when we trade the second, its group will operate. To create a new group, we go to the bottom of the replicator, click Manage, select New Group, establish a name, and configure its parent account and slave accounts. Each group can have its own configuration. One of the options available at the group level is Instrument Exclusion. This function allows us to create a list of instruments that we do not want to replicate. For example, if we normally trade micro S&P 500, but want to prevent a mini opened accidentally from being replicated to all our accounts, we can add the mini contract to the exclusion list. If we later open that instrument in the parent account, the trade will remain only there and will not be replicated to the slave accounts in the group. This function can be especially useful when we work with many accounts, since a small error in the parent account could immediately multiply if we do not previously establish the appropriate protections. When we have several groups, we can switch between them using the corresponding selector. Here it is important to understand that selecting a group only changes the group that we are viewing or configuring. The other groups do not stop working. We can be viewing Group 1 while Group 2 continues replicating normally. We should not confuse the visible group with the active groups. If we want to temporarily stop an entire group, we can turn it off using its switch. The configuration will remain saved, but the group will stop receiving new trades until we turn it back on. If we want to delete it permanently, we go into Manage and use the corresponding option. The replicator also allows us to monitor results. At the bottom, we can view the closed P&L and open P&L of the group. Closed P&L corresponds to trades that have already ended, and open P&L represents the current result of positions that still remain open. If we use several groups, we can click View Summary. From there, we will be able to view the combined result of all groups and also consult the details corresponding to each group or account. The summary also has filters and a function called Hide Names. If you want to publicly share your results, you can activate this option to hide the identifying information of your accounts. You can also copy the summary image to later share the results without exposing the full names. Now we reach one of the most important parts of the replicator, which is monitoring during trading. When we manage a single account, we can look at NinjaTrader and easily know what is happening. When we manage 10, 20, or more accounts distributed among different connections and groups, we need a more efficient way to monitor them. For this reason, we recommend keeping the replicator window visible while you are trading whenever possible. When there are no active trades, the window mainly displays the configuration options, such as the parent accounts, slave accounts, multipliers, and other parameters. However, when the replicator detects activity, it can automatically switch to the so-called operational view. This view prioritizes important information during a trade and temporarily removes configuration elements that we do not need at that moment. This allows us to view more accounts, instruments, positions, orders, and quick action controls within the same space. If we have active trades belonging to different groups, the operational view can centralize them so that it is not necessary to continuously switch from one group to another. From this view, we can also act quickly. Each group has a control to close its accounts. If we need to end the trading activity of a specific group, we can do so without closing the others. During this process, the replicator temporarily disables replication for the accounts involved to prevent the closing process itself from causing new unexpected replications. Once the procedure is completed, the accounts are once again ready for future trades. We can also act on an individual account. Let us imagine that we have a parent account and several slave accounts, but we want to close only one of the slave accounts early. In this case, we can use the individual closing button called Close and Turn Off next to the slave account in question. This button closes the position in that account and also disables its replication. This is important because if we simply close the slave account without disabling replication while the parent account remained open, the subsequent closing of the parent account could cause an opposite entry in the account. It is for this reason that, in addition to closing the account, replication is turned off to prevent this behavior. Therefore, after using Close and Turn Off, remember that this account will remain disabled. Once you have completely finished the trade in the parent account, if you want that slave account to participate again in the next trade, you will have to set it back to on. If you do not, it will deliberately remain turned off and will not receive new trades. In addition to individual and group closings, we have Close All, which works as the general emergency control of the replicator. Its purpose is to allow us to act quickly if a contingency occurs and we want to close the accounts without having to go through different groups or windows. This same emergency system may be available directly within ChartTrader. In this way, if you are looking at your chart and detect a problem, you can execute the closing without having to first find the main replicator window. If you do not want this button to appear in ChartTrader, you can disable it using the emergency button switch. However, we recommend keeping it available precisely because it is intended for moments when we need to react quickly. Now we are going to review some additional controls. The pin function allows you to save the position and size of the replicator window. You can place it wherever you prefer, adjust its dimensions, and save that layout so that it later appears again in that position. This can be especially useful if you use multiple screens or have a fixed window layout. We also have the overlay function. This allows the replicator to remain above other windows so that it continues to be visible while we work. If you prefer it to behave like a normal window, you can disable this option. Finally, we have integration with Telegram. The replicator can generate different alerts when it detects situations that require our attention. But obviously, we will not always be looking at the computer screen. That is why we can connect it to a Telegram chat and receive certain notifications directly on our phone. For example, we can receive alerts related to possible differences in the opening or closing of accounts, false positions, or other situations detected by the replicator. Telegram also allows certain commands to be executed remotely. We can request a summary of our accounts, check a specific group, perform a general close a specific group, or turn groups on and off, among other actions available in the current version. This does not mean that Telegram should replace monitoring our computer. It should be understood as an additional tool. If we are temporarily away from the computer and receive an alert, we can quickly check the status of the accounts and, if necessary, execute certain actions. The commands and alerts currently available are appearing on the screen. To use this function, go to the Telegram section within the replicator, click Configure, and follow the indicated steps to link your chat. Once the procedure is completed, you will be able to begin receiving notifications and using the available commands. Now, you can begin trading. If you are going to trade directly from NinjaTrader, you do not need to do anything else. Simply open the chart from which you normally trade, select your parent account, and begin trading. The replicator will automatically replicate the trades to the slave accounts you have configured. If you prefer to trade from another platform, such as TradingView or Tradovate, you can also do so. In that case, it is important that you keep NinjaTrader open and connected while you are trading. You can minimize the platform if you wish, but we recommend keeping the replicator window visible somewhere on your screen, since it will allow you to monitor the status of your accounts and the replication at all times. Then, simply open the platform from which you want to trade. Connect to the connection where your parent account is located, and trade that account normally. The trades will be replicated to the other accounts, just as you can see below. That said, our recommendation is that, if you know how to use NinjaTrader and are accustomed to trading from NinjaTrader, you trade directly from NinjaTrader whenever possible. Why? Because our replicator has certain additional protection and safety algorithms that can only act when the trade is executed directly from NinjaTrader. For this reason, trading from NinjaTrader allows you to take full advantage of all the protections available within the ecosystem. This does not mean that you cannot use TradingView or Tradovate. If you prefer either of these platforms, you can trade from them without any problem, as long as you keep NinjaTrader and the replicator open. You simply need to keep in mind that whenever you have the possibility of trading directly from NinjaTrader, it will be the recommended option. And if you currently trade from TradingView or Tradovate because you are not yet familiar with NinjaTrader, but later want to begin using it and take advantage of all the available protection algorithms, we will leave you a NinjaTrader in 10 minutes tutorial in the description, where you will quickly learn what you need to begin trading from the platform.